World War II. World War II began as a result of German aggression in the 1930s. Remember that while the United States was in the midst of a Great Depression, the same was true of other parts of the world. Germany was certainly no exception. In this climate, a strong leader, Adolf Hitler, rose to power as head of the Nazi or National Socialist Party. He responded to Germany's problems by blaming the Jews for many of their problems and also leading in territorial expansion. In the 30s, Germany took territory from the Rhineland and from Austria. In 1938, when Hitler took part of Czechoslovakia, this outraged the British and French. They met together about the matter and agreed on a policy of appeasement, where Hitler promised to halt his territorial expansion and that this wouldn't happen again. They would let it go at that. However, the very next year in 1939, Germany invaded Poland. At that point, France and England were ready to declare war on Germany, and World War II began. Just as in World War I, a system of alliances shaped the war, making it a worldwide war. In this case, we had the Allies, Britain, France, and later on the United States and Russia, against the Axis powers, Germany, Japan, and Italy. First, let's think about the United States' hesitance in entering World War II and why we held out as long as we did. As you'll recall from the lecture on the 1920s, after World War II, many Americans desired a return to normalcy. In the area of foreign policy, there was a shift towards isolationism, wanting to be less involved with international affairs. This can be seen in some neutrality legislation of the 1930s. For example, the cash and carry policy of 37 stated that in order for foreign nations to buy supplies from the United States, they had to pay in cash and pick up those supplies on their own ships. We were not going to be delivering supplies on our own ships on dangerous seas where we could be dragged into the conflict. Of course, from the beginning, many Americans sympathized with the Allied powers. In 1939, we changed our policy to the Lend-Lease policy, where instead of cash and carry, we would lend supplies to foreign nations who were engaged in war. But of course, this form of economic aid wasn't enough as the German Blitz swept across Europe, taking over France and threatening to topple Britain as well. Winston Churchill knew what a desperate situation they were in. He continued to appeal to President Roosevelt for the United States military assistance. It wasn't until Pearl Harbor was attacked that the United States officially entered World War II. In December of 1941, when the Japanese attacked our naval base at Pearl Harbor, the United States declared war on Japan. Keep in mind that Japan was an ally of Germany. When we declared war on Japan, Germany and Italy then in turn declared war on us. We were then involved in the World War. Before we turn to the United States military involvement in World War II, let's think about what was going on the home front. This too is an important part of waging a war. The United States came to be seen as the arsenal of democracy. Not only were we making a difference in the military aspect of the war, but we were supplying the Allies with the tools that they needed to achieve victory. Remember that this wartime demand brought us out of the Great Depression and created many new jobs. You may have heard of Rosie the Riveter. Rosie was an icon for American women who entered the workforce during this time. For example, riveting planes to be used in World War II. There had certainly been women in the American workforce before this time, but during World War II there were more than before, especially more from older groups of women and married women. World War II also resulted in an unprecedented growth of taxes in the United States. It also resulted in the internment of Japanese Americans. After being attacked by Japan, many Americans feared and mistrusted Japanese Americans, whether or not they were American citizens. So many law-abiding American citizens who posed no threat to national security simply because of their ethnicity were forced to relocate into these internment camps during the war. Back to the military aspect of the war, American forces were able to make a crucial difference in the outcome. As we invaded North Africa and Italy, we were successful, along with other Allied powers, in pushing back the Germans. They put up a stiff resistance at the Battle of the Bulge in 1944, but of course we were able to overcome. At the same time, Russia, which earlier had signed a pact with Germany not to intervene, apparently changed their minds when Germany broke its word and attacked Russia. So on the Eastern Front, Germany was fighting Russia, and on the West fighting the other Allied powers. Finally, in May of 1945, Germany fell to the Allies. Victory in Europe. As you might imagine, Americans were celebrating this achievement, but at the same time, the war was still going on in the Pacific. Let's back up for a second and talk about the war in the Pacific. The tide had begun to turn in favor of the Allies after the Battle of Midway in 1942. Things looked bad for a while. For example, MacArthur had to evacuate the Philippines when the Japanese took over the Philippines. But after 42, we gradually began regaining territory from the Japanese. By 1945, an important decision had to be made by the American government. During the war, the Manhattan Project had been ongoing, a secret project to develop atomic weapons. We were in a race against the Germans. We knew that they had been working on such developments, and we certainly wanted to beat them before they were able to use the atomic bombs against us. The Manhattan Project was spread out in several different secret locations, not only Los Alamos, New Mexico, but also closer to home, here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We were able to develop atomic bombs, test one of them, and then the decision was made to drop the other two on major Japanese cities. In September, we first dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, killing thousands immediately. I believe it was approximately 70,000. Then in the following year, there were many more deaths in the aftermath. We then dropped the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki with the same result. This crippled the Japanese resistance, forcing them to surrender quickly. I'm sure that this was a difficult decision. On the one hand, there were many innocent civilians as casualties, but on the other hand, many American troops, no doubt, would have been lost had we continued to wage traditional type war. Let's consider the legacy of World War II. What was accomplished and how was the world changed forever? For many, the first thing that comes to mind when we think about World War II's legacy is the Holocaust. And of course, the fact that the Allied victory brought an end to the Holocaust. Hitler, while in power, did exterminate millions, approximately 6 million Jews, and also other groups as well. You know the story of the concentration camps, and I believe that most Americans are proud that their country had a part in bringing an end to such injustice. But let's think about this for a second. The Holocaust, in ending the Holocaust, was not what motivated the United States to enter World War II. We had gotten word that atrocities were being carried out against the Jewish people without stepping in to stop it earlier. No doubt there were limits to what everyone knew at first, but for years prior to the Holocaust, Germany had gradually been whittling away at the rights of the Jewish people. For example, forcing them to wear the Star of David as a symbol of their Jewish status and restricting them from carrying firearms when other German neighbors were allowed to do so. It was a gradual thing, stripping them of their rights. I'm sure the German people, many of them, for a while, had no idea just what they were getting into. But then as the Nazi regime gained more and more power, many were afraid to stand up against it. Another result of World War II was in terms of democracy and freedom. Many of the Allies viewed this war effort as the effort to make the world safe for democracy. They were standing up against the aggression of Germany and taking over territories throughout Europe. Another part of the legacy of World War II was what came to be called the Greatest Generation. This nickname was given to young adults of the 1940s who rose to the challenge of World War II. Whether it be by joining the military or riveting planes, as Rosie the Riveter did. By the way, the original Rosie was from Pulaski County, Kentucky. This greatest generation, whether the label or not is appropriate, is debatable. Of course, every generation of people had their own strengths and weaknesses. They're people just like those before them or after them. But in a special way, this generation was born at a time when they could come of age during a crisis. The way in which they responded left an important footprint in American memory.